I'm Chris Stafford, and this is AART, the podcast where we get to know the women behind their art.
If you don't feel it, I'll make you feel it. I'll show you what I mean. If you don't feel it, I'll make you feel it. I'll bring you to your knees. If you follow me.
My guest this week is Robin Antar, an American rock sculptor who moves seamlessly between realism and expressionism. From hyper-realistic icons of American pop culture, influenced by Robin's wry sense of humour, her art explores personal and social trauma and conflict. Robin's parallel and intertwining bodies of work span her 40-year career as an artist observer of human nature with a broad lens on the American life. Robin was born in Atlantic City, New Jersey in 1957, one of 4 daughters. Her father, Leon Betzo, was a retailer, and her mother, Linda, an oil painter. In 1973, the family moved to Brooklyn, New York, which proved to be a tough move for Robin as a shy teenager in the city. She began learning to carve in stone in school and in the family's basement as a means of coping with urban life, using art as her emotional lifeline. In 1976, at the age of 16, Robin discovered she suffered from retrolental fibroplasia, causing blindness in her right eye since birth. While her vision was compromised, it became an integral tool among the techniques she used to create her art, despite an absence of depth perception. After graduating with a BFA from the School of Visual Arts in New York in 1981, Robin set up a working studio in Brooklyn, creating abstract sculptures in a loose, intuitive style, deeply rooted in her emotional experiences. Her themes address marriage, motherhood, divorce, and trauma through a series of conversations, relationships, and meditation that reflect the process of releasing life's traumas and their importance to survival, healing, and positive change. Trauma has visited Robin in devastating ways, with the loss of 2 of her 3 sons, whom she has memorialized through her artwork. A series of stone D-knots were carved in honor of her youngest child, David, representing his struggles with the trauma of child abuse and addiction. His death at the age of 26 resulted in one of Robin's most personal and powerful creations, David's Knot in Flames, carved from a 1,500-pound block of Turkish marble. The sculptor is permanently installed at Zucker Hillside Hospital in Glen Oaks, New York, where her son received treatment during his short life. A sculpture in memory of Leon is in progress out of a 10,000-pound piece of Carrara marble. Robin has a studio and showroom in her home in West Long Branch, New Jersey. Robin, hi. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Welcome.
It's great to have you here. As you know, I'm a fan of your work, and I've been watching what you've been doing all summer because when I first started the show, you were one of the first people I wanted on the show. But as you explained to me, you were going to be moving this summer out of the city, out of New York to New Jersey. So how has that move been going?
Well, I pretty much unpacked. Last night I unpacked. I made a showroom in the basement. There was a gym with a glass entrance and like prestigious. So I took that space and I made it a showroom for smaller sculptures. So it came out pretty good. And then I took the upstairs and I have about 60 sculptures on the first level.
I can only imagine what that must have been like moving, Robin. An absolute nightmare for the movers, the weight of it all.
Wow, it was 6 truckloads. 2 trucks full of sculptures. I actually had to hire museum movers to move the finished sculptures.
And did everything arrive safely?
Everything arrived safely. Even I packed the small sculptures, and I'm proud of myself. Nothing was broken. And I guess I was trained good from my father. He was a packer. He had a retail store, and he was like one of the expert packers of the partners. And he taught me how to pack. So every time I pack a box to this day, I think of him. And nothing got broken.
That has stood you in good stead. You say you never know when things like that are going to come in handy from your childhood.
Yeah.
That's a lot of work you've got there, Robin. You have a very high productivity rate, judging by your social media and what you post.
Yeah, I'm a workaholic. I mean, I slowed down for the past 3 months because my studio, I had to close it in June and pack it up. And I'm just that's the last thing on my list. It's to unpack the studio supplies in my new location. It's a little tricky because I still want to do construction for the studio. So I have to unpack it, but keep everything secure. So when I have a team of contractors come in, things don't walk.
And now, do you have a bigger and better space than what you had before? Because you were a long time in New York City.
I was a long time in Brooklyn. I was there from 87 to, in that location, about 87 to about 2023. So it was a long time, a lot of accumulation of stuff. It was very tricky because I packed about 300 boxes, not counting the heavier sculptures.
I'd imagine that was one big headache you are glad is behind you.
Yes, and I unpacked every box except for 12 boxes in the studio. I still got to organize. I ordered a new tool chest. Of course, I ordered royal blue and shocking yellow and shocking orange. And I got rid of the old tool chest because I figured I might as well have fun. So I'm in the process. I'm waiting for 2 more tool chests to come in, and we're going to unpack it all. I will pull out what I can use by hand. The rest of the stuff is going to be locked up, and I'm going to shrink wrap it. And this way, when I do construction, it doesn't walk. Because you accumulate tools for the past 50 years. You don't want them walking. And it's not a matter, besides they're expensive in money, it's a matter of, it's your tool. It's like your kid.
Absolutely. That's what you craft with. And I'm wondering, because of the toxic nature of some of the stones that you work with, Robin, how you deal with the ventilation when you have to work indoors in the winter.
Well, I just purchased a very expensive, and I hope it works, ventilation system. And I'm trying to find the proper contractor out there who's willing to do it. So far, I interviewed 4 contractors, and they're all looking at me like I'm crazy. So the search is on. The ventilation system is filterless. So the dust gets sucked into this filter, and the dust collects in a drum. And then you press a button, and the drum will vibrate with a very loud noise. You have to make sure you're wearing ear protection. And the dust will be released from the drum to a tray, and then you spill the tray out of dust.
I always enjoy your videos, Robin, of when you're actually doing your work and describing, the work environment and the stone. So it's a fascinating process, something that you've been involved with all your life. You were a born sculptor, right? This is something that you've always done.
I've done it since I was 14 or 15. I went to high school, and the minute I touched the stone, I was hooked. I just loved it. Like, that was it.
No background of working with stone then? No sort of influences there from your family? Where do you think that came from?
Well, my father was very artistic in his own way. My mother took painting lessons. In fact, when I started in high school, she let me. I literally trashed the house, and I don't know if I would let my kids do it. I took the basement. Now, this is back in the day, in 1973, 74, before anybody knew about ventilation systems. And I would take a drill with a sanding disc, and sit there and sand Wonderstone, which is now I know is toxic. I don't carve it anymore, in her basement. And the dust would go flying. And I remember her telling me, Robin, the steps are white. And I would go out and I would try to clean up after myself. But she put up with a lot of my nonsense.
Well, it's paid off now. I mean, she must be enormously proud. I know your father's passed away, but your mum's still with us, and she must be enormously proud of what you've created in your lifetime already.
Yeah, she's excited. I tell her, like, I just sold something the other day, and I say, hey, Ma, Milk and Cookies took a walk and went sailing. I sold it, and she gets happy.
That's wonderful. Tell me a little bit more about your childhood. What else were you interested in? You're born in Atlantic City in New Jersey, and so you haven't strayed too far from the East Coast there. I'm wondering what that early childhood environment was like for you. What were your influences and your passions when you were very young?
Well, I always knew from a young age that I always loved craft. And I was always, and it's funny because when I was in 7th and 8th grade, I stunk in art. My teacher failed me. Art and music that I stunk at. And gym. Came home from school crying one day. I failed gym. So I asked the teacher, why did I fail? She goes, well, if you changed into your gym suit, maybe you wouldn't fail. But I wasn't good at that stuff. I was not good. But I loved art, and I always knew I wanted to do something creative. Academics was not my specialty. I had a hard time with academics. And I always gravitated towards the arts. In fact, when it came time to go to college, I interviewed for Pratt, Parsons, and School of Visual Arts. And believe it was either Pratt or Parsons, I don't remember which one, told me, all you have to do is sign your name on the SAT. We don't care if you get a 200, you're in. And I was so scared to do that, I just went to School of Visual Arts.
So what kind of a child would you say you were then, Robin, when you look back? Were you introverted?
Yeah, I was definitely an introvert. And the art, being an artist, saved my life. As an adult, with all the traumas you go through. But even as a kid, once I started in high school, I used to make these pendants with my initials and other people's initials. I used to cut out, I used to get sterling silver a 1/4 inch thick and cut it out with a little jeweler's saw. And once I started selling my things, because I wanted to be independent and go buy my own supplies. I mean, I remember my mother driving me to Long Island to go get stone in some crazy place. But I used to want to go to the art supply store and experiment and just buy paper and see what it's going to do. And that's how I came up with the idea to stain the stone, because I did it to paper. And then I said, oh, let me transfer it to stone. So through that experiment, you develop your own way. And I didn't want to ask my parents for money to do experimentation. So I would sell pendants, earrings, jewelry out of all my scraps of stone. And that gave me the confidence. And I broke out of my shell. Like I tell people I was shy when I was little. They don't believe me. But I was very shy.
You moved to Brooklyn. So, I mean, that was a pretty tough upbringing for a child. What was school like, though? Did you find that tough as a child?
Well, that's when I got into art when I moved, because when I moved from Atlantic City, or Margate was the town we lived in, to Brooklyn, the community was not very nice to me because I'm a newcomer. And I was like 15. It was 1973. And they weren't so nice to me. So I had choices. I had to do something to occupy my time. I could have went with the wrong crowd, or I could have found a hobby. And at that point, I found sculpture. And right away, I started doing sculpture and I started selling. When I was in high school, I was selling. Like I said, I was selling to buy supplies. Not enough to make an income and survive, but I was selling. Back in 73, I used to go to the art store and spend $200 on a pop, on paper, on all kinds of materials so I can experiment. And I did that with the money I sold from jewelry.
So you were commercial very early on then.
Well, when I was a little kid, I'll never forget, I was in first grade and my father had a retail store. And he said to me, I said, Dad, I want to go to work with you. I was always a worker. And he said, here's $5, stay home. I was so upset. And I remember it like it was yesterday. And I was upset. And ever since even when I was a youngster, like in second grade, my sisters and I went into a business that made beaded necklaces to support Lucy the Elephant in Long Branch. There was like a cement elephant and they were doing all this fundraising to upkeep it. And it's still there and they just revived it for, I don't know how much, hundreds of thousands of dollars. I don't know, but they put a lot of money into it. And it's still there. But it's funny because we used to do these beaded bracelets for Lucy the Elephant. I was always a hustler. Nobody ever says I'm lazy. If I'm lazy, I don't feel good.
Well, that stood you in good stead because, as I said earlier, your productivity rate is quite something now. And it's a tough job that you're doing. I mean, physically tough, physically demanding, Robin. Does it take its toll on you physically? Are you fit and hardened by now?
Well, certain things I can't do. I cannot lift over 40 pounds, doctor's orders. So if I need something lifted, it doesn't stop me from getting it lifted. I just pick up the phone and I call somebody. Hello, I need a stone moved from A to B. Come flip it. Come turn it. I used to have full-time help. Right now, I don't. Hopefully, when I get my studio set up, I want to put it in I-beam and I want to get some staff in here and, when I'm working on something big to flip it and turn it.
What kind of size do you really prefer to work with? Is it the medium or the larger? Is it bigger the better? Where's your comfort zone?
I like about a 200-300 pound block. What I'm going to do is I have a cutting room where you cut and grind in that room. So that room is where you take either your 5-inch, your 7-inch. I'm more comfortable with the 5-inch, so I'd rather use the 5-inch and be more aggressive. I use a 7-inch if I have a clean line to cut and I need to just to make a straight line, but I don't use it much. I prefer the 5-inch. The 9-inch I do not go near. I know people use it. I don't go near it.
So what's a typical day then? Do you work all through the day or into the evening, or does it depend on the piece you're working on or a deadline even?
Depends on a deadline. It depends if I'm in the selling mode or the work mode. I didn't start working yet in my new studio here because I'm still unpacking it. And hopefully in the next couple of weeks, that's going to happen after the holidays.
You mentioned your dad has passed, but your mum, Linda, what did she used to do?
She used to paint and she was pretty good at it. And when I moved to Brooklyn, she encouraged me to go take painting lessons. And I took up painting lessons. She dropped it. And I always tried to get her back into it over the years, but she never picked it up again.
What kind of painting did she do?
She did oil painting.
Landscapes or still life?
Landscapes and still lifes.
So there is that artistic streak in your blood then?
Yeah. My mother was artistic. She still is artistic. She doesn't do it. And my father was definitely creative because he used to work on he had this retail store on the boardwalk in Atlantic City. So if he had a statue, like a jade statue, and it crumbled in 20 pieces, he was able to glue it together. And that takes skill.
Your work seems to come from the inside out. So I'm wondering, when you look at the piece, do you let it tell you what it's going to become?
Well, I have two types of work. I have the realism, which I'm more known for. And then the realism is demanding, where you have to be centered. You have to be very centered when you do the realism. The expression work, I don't like to call it abstract, even though it's not recognizable images. I like to call it expression pieces because they come from the gut. When I carved David's Knot in Flames, I did that 9 months after losing my youngest child. And I don't remember carving it. I don't know how I did it. I literally attacked the stone. And at one point, I attacked the stone where I had to make a hole. And when you have to make a hole through a 15-inch stone, the common sense way to do it is to get a corbet with a water line with the central water feed where you core the hole through the stone. But you also get a spotter to hold a straight edge to guide you whether you should go up or down so the hole lands up in the right spot. I wasn't doing any of that. I was in such a rage. I remember doing that stone. I just attacked the stone with a 5-inch diamond blade. And I didn't even do it from the right side. I didn't do it from the bottom up, which my hole would have probably been in the spot that I wanted it. I did it from the back and I was going down. And I was angry. Okay, I just lost a child. I was like beside myself. There was no discipline in my carving. I just attacked that stone like a maniac. And the hole came out 8 inches too low. And then the symposium was over and I was going to finish it the following year and I left it. I couldn't figure out what I was going to do. Like I sort of figured out, I knew I wanted a flame, but I couldn't figure out the stylistic conclusion of the flame. So I left it. The minute I left it, I got home, I printed out a picture of it. I figured out what I was going to do and I knew what I was going to do. And the negative space of that piece turned out to be an arrow. And it was really interesting because I was not planning it. So basically, the knot was supposed to be a knot going into a flame, but instead it was a knot that broke open, split into a flame. And the reason I picked the knot, because that child had an extremely hard life. In fact, I wrote a book on his life. And the sculpture is called David's Knot in Flames. David was severely sexually molested at age 2.5. No parent should ever go through it. And that's why a lot of my sculptures from the 90s are extremely passionate with movement because of all the trauma going through during that ordeal. And I did write the book. I'm looking for a publisher. It's not an easy read. It tells all the details of what the child told me when he was expressing himself at 2 years and 10 months old. I took a detailed diary of everything he said. And that's how I survive. And I get to step outside of the trauma. Like you're walking in a line dealing with these things, and then you visualize that you could step out and you could survive the trauma. And my art has saved my life. Because if I didn't do David's Knot in Flames, I don't think I'd be sitting here doing this interview. And there's a lot of other stuff that happened that I'm not getting into with this interview, but the point is art is a savior. Just the fact of me moving from Atlantic City to Brooklyn, not having any friends, my best friend was my chisel and my stone in my studio. And I was cool with it. I was, and in fact, today I say, thank you, people, because I didn't waste my time socializing and going to parties. I built a career. So I look at the glass half full.
That's a very moving story, Robin.
I know you weren't expecting that.
May I ask what the flame represents?
The flame represents going into heaven. What David, my son, did, may he rest in peace. He was a victim of severe child molestation. And at age 13, he went into drugs because he started to self-medicate. He was on psychiatric medicine from 2.5. or 4, whatever it was. I think it was 4 or 5. But he started self-medicating because of the trauma when he was a teenager. You know, when kids become teenagers, they usually go to the right or the left, and you got to try to keep them in the middle. And I've done tons of interventions, 32 pages long of interventions, because I knew this child was high risk. So the knot represents his hard life because he struggled. The flame represents internal flame to heaven. And also what he did is he created this corporation called Cry Out. And what he did was he saved hundreds of lives, but he couldn't help himself. He'd pick up people from the Bowery in California and drive them to rehab. And I still get phone calls from people saying that they saved his life, that they saved their life. Like a parent says, yeah, I know your son helped my son. And even the kid he helped would tell me thank you. So he saved a lot of people's lives. But what happened was when he saved these people's lives, he was too close to the drugs and he went back. Like the day before he passed, he drove his friend 4 hours up the mountain to rehab.
And he was just 26.
He was 26. He had a heart of gold. What he would do, if I'm walking in the street and I would see like somebody homeless, he'd say, Ma, stop, go buy him a pizza. Don't give him money, buy him a pizza. And lots of times I'll see somebody homeless, I'll buy something, and I tell the guy, I said, this is a memory of my son, and I'll give him to him or something, a sandwich or whatever. Because that's what he would have done. And it made him feel good. He loved to help.
It sounds as if he made a wonderful contribution even during his short life.
Yes, he made a contribution to life, and he had a heart of gold. I don't know anybody like him. Okay, he had a heart of gold. He would take off his shirt and give it to you.
And then tragically, he lost his brother Leon too.
Right, Leon passed away. David passed away in 2013. Leon passed away. It's coming on 2 years in 2021. Leon was a totally different kind of child. One was an extrovert, one was an introvert. Leon passed away of a heart attack, and he was very creative. He used to be in the interior decorator business, and I have a corner of my house that's dedicated to all his sculptures. He did stone carving a year before he passed away. I took him with me to my retreat, and he did a phenomenal piece in 10 days. Like nobody could believe he never picked up a tool before.
He'd obviously been watching you, though.
Yeah, he used to, when he was a kid, he used to work with me in the shop. And he used to want me to do all his dirty work, like, Ma, cut the stone for me. Ma, polish it. I said, Leon, I don't work for you. Cut your own stone.
And did you hope that he maybe would have taken that up more seriously and followed it as a career like you?
Yes. So in fact, he had a corporation called the Happy People Company. And he used to make these wire sculptures of all these happy people. And I said, Leon, let's make like 40 of them. I'll help you. And we'll go outside the Met and we'll sell them. Or I'll get you a spot in Jacob Javits Center and Art Expo. But he sold a lot when he was in high school, but he never wanted to take it to the next level. And I still have a lot of his pieces. I treasure them because they're very cute. And he designed people's houses. He was a perfectionist. And in fact, he designed a table that he never got to create. And the person who was making this table for him is taking his design and making it into a base for his sculpture that he did up in the mountains. He was very creative, and he was a perfectionist.
Well, you can be very proud of that. and to have those pieces of work still of his.
Yeah, I treasure them.
I do want to ask you about Eddie because your other son is still with us. Tell us about him.
Eddie's still with us, God bless him. He just got married, and they're the Brady Bunch, and it's the cutest thing.
So you have a lot of fun with small people now.
Yeah, I got 6 grandkids from 2 to 6. I love it.
Any of them making their way into your studio yet?
Well, my granddaughter, the other 4 that just came into the family, didn't get in my studio yet because I was in the middle of moving. But his first daughter, my son's first daughter, which is the namesake of me, I had her in my studio and she was sculpting stone and she wants to do a whale. And then it was really funny. We had this column of honeycomb calcite, which is like a bright yellow.
Oh, I love that. Yes.
And I said, okay, Ron, what do you want to do with this? And she goes, I said, how about we cut one end and cut the other end? I said, okay, but instead of cutting the end straight, let's cut it at an angle. So she goes, okay. So I go in the other room and I cut it because it's dangerous to cut with the 5-inch blade and I don't want her around. So I cut one end and I cut the other end at an angle and I stand it up at the table. And I didn't see this because I'm just not a girly girl. She goes, Grandma, it looks like lipstick. I said, OMG, you're so clever. So she polished it up. And here it is. She's maybe 9 at the time, 8 or 9. She polished a piece of honeycomb calcite from 36 grit to 400.
Oh, my goodness.
And to get this thing to shine, you got to go from 400 to 12,000. So I went up going from 400 to 12,000. She went from 36 to 400. And I thought that was phenomenal for an 8-year-old because honeycomb calcite's not alabaster. It's soft, but it's not soft like alabaster. So it's tricky. And she was polishing it. And then I mounted it for her on a piece of granite, and it looks very cool. In fact, I made another one. And I said, because I said, oh, this is cool. But she was pretty clever. And then she wants to do a whale next. So we have to work on her whale.
Well, you have an apprentice there then.
Oh, yeah. But she lives in New York. I'm in Jersey. But whenever I could steal her, I steal her. And then I got 4 more girls that we're going to train too. So,
gosh, you've got a team there.
Yeah, we're going to get them all in the studio.
I wanted to ask you about that honeycomb. Can you make jewelry out of it, Robin?
It depends. You want to make a jewelry and put a bezel around it? Yes. To carve a ring out of it, I wouldn't. It's too fragile. It will split where the splits are.
But as a necklace?
If it's a chunky piece, you could get away with it, but you have to watch where the veins are. Because it could split where the veins are. But it's also hard. So when it comes time to polishing, you have to, if it's that small, you got to polish it by hand. So you would have to put it in the rough, when you're doing the rough grits, you would put it in some kind of vise because it will take you forever. You got to cut out your shape. How are you going to cut out the shape? So you got to put it in some kind of vise. To hold it in your hand and use a 5-inch grinder, it's a little tricky on a small piece. You could use little like Dremels, but it's tricky. You have to be careful.
It is so beautiful. Of course, I'm going to ask you where you find all these wonderfully beautiful, gorgeous pieces of stone, Robin. Where's your sources?
Well, I have a guy, I've known him for like 20, 30 years. He's great. He's up in Kansas, and his name is Miles from To Sculpt. And he has a great array of stone. Like one time he had blue onyx. When I go to Marble every summer to a symposium, he had a palette of blue onyx. And I go, Miles, I love it. I'm taking the whole palette. I'm a stone junkie, I admit.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, like you've been called many times a rock star.
But I when I find a good find, I made these little teeny figures out of that blue onyx. It's so bright blue. I've never seen blue onyx that bright. The problem is they're not big pieces, so I had to make small pieces. So I made my COVID twisted figures. No, not my COVID twisted. My COVID visitors. I call them studio visitors. Because one day I was lonely in my studio and you couldn't have any visitors. So actually it's very therapeutic for me to actually create visitors out of stone. And I made these 2 graphic designs of figures. And it's funny, but it made me feel better.
In terms of then of your retail, do people actually come and physically, once you're set up, visit the workshop and the studio?
Yes. Well, I plan on doing, obviously the pieces I have are in galleries. I have some pieces in Mykonos and I have some pieces in Pop International Gallery in Manhattan. I have things on First Dibs. And what I do is, and I sell out of my house, but what I do is I am completely translucent with my prices. And the only way I could do this and put my head on the pillow and go to sleep at night is all my prices are the same throughout all platforms. And I get people who come in my house and want to buy a piece. I sell it to them. And what I'm going to do in my new location, you're not really allowed to have like a business out of your house. But what I could do is do fundraisers. So instead of giving 50% to a gallery, what I'm going to do is create an opening, pick a percentage, and give the percentage to a fundraiser. And my first fundraiser is going to be Hatzalah. And what Hatzalah is, it's Jewish ambulance. And God forbid of an emergency, you call them up and they're in your house in 5 minutes. And they're absolutely phenomenal. I've called them several times for my parents. And I even had to call them once for myself. So that's number 1 on my charity. And that's what I plan on doing. That's why I'm setting up like a showroom. I'm taking my new house. I'm basically making it a showroom.
Fabulous. Well, I do plan to come and visit your showroom one day, Robin.
You're more than welcome.
I want to go back a little bit back to your teenage years, because the artist you've become has been quite the journey, given that you discovered as a teenager that you had no vision in your right eye due to retrolental fibroplasia. That made you see the world very differently. But how did you discover that you had been blind since birth in that one eye?
Well, it's weird. It's weird. I went to this doctor. You know, my mother was always taking me to an eye doctor. So now I moved from Brooklyn to from Jersey to Brooklyn. And I go to this doctor and he looks at me and he says, you're 99 9/10 blind in your right eye. And I look at him, I go, what? Like nobody, throughout elementary school, nobody ever covered my good eye to do a vision test. And so basically when I was told that, I freaked. And I started doing all these visual pieces, what it's like. And then a few years after that, I had a detached retina in my blind eye. Even though I saw color out of the eye, I saw very little shape or forms. Like if a male or female is standing in front of me, I can't make out whether it's a male or female. You would see color, and color with contrast. So when I had the detached retina and all of a sudden that eye became black, I felt the unbalance, and I called these series Unbalanced Vision. And I decided to look from the inside out In other words, what's it like to look from inside me, what it's like to see out with one eye? And what would become visible at first is your nose and your glasses. So I did tons of paintings and drawings, and then I converted the technique into stone. And I did about 5 sculptures in that series. And then I'd said, okay, Rom, move on, next. But I expressed what it's like, and I call those a visual series.
And that's all you've ever known?
Somebody once asked me if I could teach an art class of what it's like to be visually impaired sculpting. And I said, no, because I don't know what it's like to see out of both eyes. I've never done it, never had it. I was born this way. So I can't teach you how to compensate. Obviously, I'm compensating, but I don't know how I'm doing it. I'm just doing it. Like, nobody told me ways to compensate. Whatever I'm doing, I just made up on my own, and you want to say wing it, but I winged it.
Well, you're still winging it pretty darn good, Robin, I have to say. In terms of the two, the expressionism and the realism in your work, which do you find the most satisfying, or does that depend on the piece? Or does it indeed depend on your frame of mind and the emotions at the time?
Well, if I have something I want to say, to me, to do an expression piece, I do it in my sleep. Okay. What happens is you just have the tool in your hand, and the tool becomes a part of your body. Like, I did a video once, and it was so true. The chisel is an extension of your fingers, and you just get in that groove, and you don't even realize what you're doing. And then all of a sudden you woke up and you go, OMG, that's it? Like, what did I do? Like, when I do an expression piece, I don't have a preconceived idea, except for the minuscule sketch, or like I decided I didn't want to do any more knots. After David's Knot in Flames, I said, I'm not doing any more knots, enough knots. And then I did balancing acts, because I decided that all the stress in life, you have to balance it. Well, I broke my rule because I'm doing another knot for Leon, but I can't help it. But it depends on your mood. But then when you do a realism and you do a boot and you step back 10 feet and you go, which one's real and which one's fake? And you have to take a double take. That's a sense of accomplishment too. It's a different feeling.
Very, very different. And I would imagine, though, with your vision, there's a difference between sort of convex and concave when you're looking at 3D pieces or subjects.
Well, when I do my realism, I have the actual object in front of me. And what I do, if I get confused of which one's concave and convex, either I hold a straight edge in front of it, or I look at the negative space and the shadows. And that gives me clues, especially if I'm doing jeans and creases. Those are fun.
You must have a sense of humor, too, that seems to come across. There's a little bit of mischief in your work, isn't there?
I try to have a sense of humor.
Yeah. And with those realism pieces, clearly you must have so much fun. And are there any now that you know, you've said everything is for sale, but are there any that you really want to put, behind the curtain so nobody can see, and that are real keepers?
Well, the only thing that I say is not for sale is this painting I did. I believe it was in the early 80s. While I discovered that I was blind in one eye, I think I was still in my apartment. So I must have been before 87. And basically it was nose and glasses and seeing infinity. And through the glasses, you see crystal sharp. And up in infinity, you see blurry, because if you're not wearing glasses, you can't see. And to me, that piece is a very personal piece. And that's like the only thing I think in my inventory that I say is not for sale. Everything else, I put my price on it. I photograph it really good. I have a record, and then I just let it go.
Isn't that hard, though, emotionally, to let some of these pieces go that are really a part of you?
Well, no, it's funny you should say that, because when I moved into my new house, I didn't feel I moved in until all my babies came. And I call the sculptures my babies. And then when I moved my tools in, then I really said, I'm home. And I said, a house without art isn't a home. Because when I left Brooklyn and that house was empty and I'm looking around that house, I said to myself, this is not home. There's no art. Art, you need art in a house. It just, I can't explain it. It just was dead. And I even did a video on that. And it was like, but it's so true. Like, I don't know if you ever thought about that. A house with no art.
Are you an art collector, Robin? Do you collect other people's work, paintings or anything?
I've bought a few things. I've bought a sculpture from Rex Branson in the mountains. And it taught me something because I saw the sculpture and it resonated with me. And I said, I'm buying this. And all my friends look at me, what are you, crazy? You got 100 sculptures in the house. You're buying another one. I said, this piece resonated with me. And what it was puzzle pieces. And it just resonated with me. And I have it by my back door in my new house. And people walk in, they go, this doesn't look like yours. I said, it's not. It's Rex Branson from Marble, Colorado. Because this sculpture was puzzle pieces and life is a puzzle. And when you see something, it made me understand why people buy art. Because when it resonates with you, you buy it.
You have to have it. You feel a connection to it.
Right. You feel connected. And it doesn't matter the price. Because let's say the thing's $100,000. You can't afford it. You buy something from the artist that's $1,000. There's always something in someone's price point. But when something resonates with you and you like this, it's just like, I'm on it. Oh, I want it. That's it. I never felt that way with other objects. It's just strange that with art, that's the way it is.
Do you have any projects that you want to do, whether you're commissioned or not? I mean, do you have a little list that you keep in a notebook somewhere?
Yeah. Okay. On my backyard, I have a back deck. And I'm going to be putting, it started out as a 6,000-pound block of Colorado Yule. I started it in 210. And it's going on my back deck. It's going to be a giant bag of chips. The chip bag I finished. They're making up the base. And I'm in the process of figuring out how to do the 3D printing for the potato chips. Because they did some samples and they wanted a fortune. And the guy says, I got to find another supplier because this is ridiculous. You need 20, 30 chips and it's going to be like crazy expensive. So that's that project. Then I did the U.S. Constitution in a knot. I have a series called What is America Now? America is crazy. Everybody's fighting. I did boxing gloves. I did boxing gloves. I did a Trump hat. And the bag of M&Ms started because that was my idea when Twin Towers happened. I said, what is America? America's comfort food. And I did a bag of M&Ms. And so that's going to be my group with the U.S. Constitution in a knot. The U.S. Constitution in a knot with marble hands holding it up on a pile of granite rocks. And it says, we the people of the United States. So basically, the Constitution is in a knot. So that's taking my realism and my expression works and joining them together for the first time.
Yeah, I love that piece. I've seen that piece. You've shared that with me.
It's not finished yet. I still didn't get it back yet. We have to do one more thing to it, and I'm supposed to be getting it back. As soon as I get it back, I will as soon as I get it back, I will hire a professional photographer.
It's going to be outside, so you're going to have, did you say 3 pieces?
The potato chip bag's going outside. The knot's going in my front hallway the minute you walk in the house. And hopefully I get it into a museum show with the M&Ms and the hat and the boxing gloves. But I'm waiting to get that piece back so I can photograph it and make a proposal.
So what next? What's waiting for you in terms of commissions, though? Your actual bread and butter in the studio?
Bread and butter I don't have any further commissions coming up. I'm doing stuff just because I'm a crazy lunatic artist and I'm doing stuff. I'm doing a baseball mitt out of Belgian black marble, which is, the shape is done, and I have to clean it up and figure out how I'm going to weave in and out the leather and polish it up. And that's the realism. And then the expression, I have what I call a COVID twisted figure. It's a figure, my graphic design of a figure, but it's all twisted up and it's out of a white onyx.
Oh, gorgeous. Yeah.
So those are the 2 pieces that are waiting for me in my studio. I also have a piece which I started, I'm embarrassed to say when, in 1992. It started out as a wall with grapes. And then I started cutting out the wall and weaving the grapes in between the wall. It's like 90% finished. And that's the piece I'm going to work on as soon as I start working, before I get my machine set up, because that requires a lot of handwork and I could do that without a ventilation system. So that's next in my line.
What do you do to help your hands at the end of the day, and physically to relieve your body? Because that's so intense. You must be so strong.
I'm not so strong because, like I said, I don't lift more than 40 pounds because of my eyes. But what I do is, whenever I pick up a tool that vibrates, I put gloves with a wrist support. And then back in 1980, I thought I was going to have to sell my tools and quit the trade in 87, I believe it was, 87, 89. 89, like 2 years after I got my studio in my new house. My wrist started killing me. And then I discovered these gloves. And as long as you wear these gloves, you can control carpal tunnel. And that's helped me.
It's so much fun. I could talk to you about your stonework all day because I absolutely love the work that you're doing. So long may it continue, Robin. And I look forward to coming and seeing your studio one day. Thank you so much for being my guest.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. And I'm honored to be your guest.
And you'll find a link to Robin's website, robinantar.com, in the show notes accompanying this episode, with also links to her social media, as well as our social media. At Instagram, we're at the AART Podcast, that's with 2 A's. We would love you to follow us along there and leave any comments, questions, or suggestions for guests that you may have. And you can also find us on Facebook at Hollowell Studios. If you have a moment, as always, you'll know I'll remind you to please leave us a review, a 5-star rating on iTunes, because that makes a big difference to our rankings and helps others find the show, because it makes us more visible. My thanks again to my guest this week, Robin Antar, and to you for listening. I'll be back next week with another episode, so I do hope you'll join me then.